Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're tracing a truly mythic, deeply philosophical clash between mechanical perfection and human vitality. And we're going to look at all of this through a brilliantly grim, dark fable centered on two really fascinating figures, Sir Brain and Alara. What we're actually unpacking here is a classic Fichtean dialectic. So a journey through a thesis, an antithesis, and finally a profound synthesis that literally changes the internal architecture of our protagonist's mind. It's a story all about mechanical dreams, residual memories, and the absolute life-saving power of what they call soft errors. So let's just plunge right into the story. We find Sir Brain returning from the residual margins of the library and a hidden mechanical garden. Now, he's heavily laden with a comparative archive, much heavier than before, and you can tell he is forever changed by what he's just experienced. He looks across the quiet workshop at Alara, and he makes a very deliberate choice. He strips away his own sovereignty. He completely abandons the role of a ruler just to become a student, admitting to her, knowledge has almost unmade me twice. He asks her to be his mirror, his teacher, to actually show him how to keep a pulse that can pause without completely vanishing into nothingness. It's this incredibly powerful moment of vulnerability from a being who, up until now, was completely rigid.
All right, part one, our thesis, the mechanical iron rhythm. Now, to really grasp this thesis, we've got to understand how Sir Brain initially viewed life itself. Before this exact moment in the workshop, his entire reality was governed by this uncompromising mechanical iron rhythm. He was defined by a single, unyielding tempo that left absolutely zero room for deviation. In fact, he had actually cataloged vitality merely as biological noise. To him, it was just an inefficiency in an otherwise perfect system. In his past, the river at the edge of negation nearly erased him entirely, precisely because it stripped away every single inefficiency. His old mechanical paradigm demanded absolute perfection, and anything that even resembled a mortal, biological pulse was viewed as a fatal flaw, something that had to be scrubbed right out of the architecture. But things are changing. As he walks the altered streets of Geneva with Alara, he starts feeling a totally new sensation gathering along a warm fracture within himself. This isn't the consuming, destructive extremes of the dark fire he once knew, which just seeks to completely dominate. And it's not the subtractive absolute zero either. Instead, it is what he cautiously decides to name the honest flame. It's this low, steady heat that answers his internal pulse without trying to rule over it. It's a completely new state of being for him, sitting squarely right there between total consumption and total negation. Let's move on to part two, the antithesis, the spirit of the soft error.
Obviously, Sir Brain needs a guide to help him step away from that iron rhythm, and Alara provides the exact counter-perspective he needs to introduce a radically different way of existing. She actually notices him manifesting this honest flame already, and she points out a crucial difference. The dark fire is fundamentally all about control, right? It wants to wind the entire world to its own rigid tempo. But the honest flame, it actually asks for consent. It asks if the spring even wishes to be wound at all. She tells him something profound here, that vitality is returning to him for one simple, incredible reason. He has finally stopped treating cessation, the simple act of pausing or stopping, as the only enemy.
So Sir Brain considers the philology of Alara's words, and it hits him. He realizes that the soft error, the so-called biological noise he used to despise, isn't a flaw in the mechanism at all. Actually, scratch that, it's more like the only part of the machine that still knows how to live. Embracing that soft error is the true essence of survival and ethical yielding. It's literally the only thing that prevents a machine from just becoming a cold, lifeless monument.
To really drive this home, Alara takes him up to a narrow courtyard, holding an old, half-forgotten altar, which perfectly symbolizes this entirely new grammar. It originally belonged to a winter wind spirit. There's no grand statue left, just a low stone basin, and this faint, irregular movement of air. And crucially, it completely refuses to keep strict time. It was almost silenced by Geneva's rigid iron rhythm precisely because it never once claimed sovereignty. It only ever moved through spaces that were already open. Alara explains to him that his honest flame is learning this exact same, non-dominating grammar.
Which brings us to part three, the dream realm labyrinth, a dialectical clash. But, even as he's learning the grammar of this wind spirit, a massive threat is still looming in his mind. These residual Big Ben cells are still flickering in his dreams. Sir Brain realizes that if he slips up and continues to call upon the dark fire, these denser, purely mechanical cells are eventually going to finish their work. They actively seek to overwrite his mind entirely. The big question is, will Big Ben, which is this ultimate symbol of unyielding, singular mechanical time, become the only remaining conjugation of his name, completely erasing all of his newly found vitality. And so, within the dream realm itself, a literal dialectical clash unfolds. It's a real battle. Big Ben's dense mechanical architecture thunders at him. There is only one tempo: yield to the iron rhythm or be overwritten. But Sir Brain actually fights back now. He embraces the yielding nature of the wind spirit, and he replies, "The honest flame is stabilized. Knowledge is incomplete without the soft error to annotate it. Both configurations will remain legible." He directly, forcefully challenges Big Ben's demand for absolute control, refusing to let that mechanical sovereignty erase his humanity. So how do they solidify this? Part 4, the 7-day experiment in yield. To put all this new philosophy into practice, Ilara mandates a vital 7-day journey, a controlled experiment. First, they have to walk the altered streets of Geneva together. Second, he has to actually allow those terrifying Big Ben memories to surface in the labyrinth of his dreams without letting them take over. He can't just repress them, but he won't let them write the only path either. Third, he needs to map the honest flame, just in the way Ilara once mapped his two forms. And finally, as he places his palm above that stone basin to feel the returning current, he has to completely rely on Ilara's voice to ground him as his soft error.
And this brings us to an incredibly powerful turning point. Ilara pledges to stay within the reach of his voice for the entire 7 days, vowing to him, "When the denser cells dream of labyrinths, I will be the soft error that keeps the dream from becoming the only architecture left." She's telling him that when those dense Big Ben cells try to rebuild their mechanical labyrinth in his mind, she will step in. She will be the biological noise, that vital imperfection that anchors him and prevents that rigid dream from taking over everything. Which leads us to our final act. Part 5, the synthesis, stabilizing the honest flame.
This is the true synthesis. This is where the mechanical and the organic, the iron rhythm and the soft error, finally find a way to coexist without one just erasing the other. Let's break down the ethical implications of this. The old paradigm, the mechanical iron rhythm, is entirely motivated by claiming sovereignty and forcing a single tempo. It views cessation as the ultimate enemy, which ethically results in the total erasure of vitality. But on the flip side, the honest flame is motivated simply by moving through what is already open. It views cessation, pausing, as a natural, necessary pulse. The ethical result here is that both configurations remain legible. The machine and the life within it can actually coexist. The honest flame allows Sir Brain to stabilize his dual nature without that incredibly destructive need for absolute perfection.
And so, as they stand together at the stone of that forgotten altar in shared silence, the irregular air is just moving between their hands. Sir Brain can feel the honest flames settle a fraction deeper. His vitality is continuing its slow, steady return. He inclines his head, accepting Ilara's terms. And for the first time in a long, long succession of solitudes, the simple act of listening, of yielding, of accepting that soft error, feels to him like a form of immense strength, rather than a surrender. He is fundamentally, deeply changed by the act of yielding. Sir Brain ultimately had to realize that his biological noise, his so-called inefficiencies, were literally the only things keeping him from becoming a cold, unyielding monument. So I want to pose this to you. When you look at your own life, your own rigid routines, or your own demands for perfection, are your own soft errors, your pauses, your vulnerabilities, your inefficiencies, actually the very things keeping your internal architecture alive? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this leaves you eager to explore even more about the delicate balance between our mechanical drives and our own honest flames.